Welcome to Grief Heals, the podcast that explores how grief heals. Join us as we consider how grief invites love within ourselves, our communities, our world, our histories, and how it is that grief heals. I'm Lisa Michelle Zega here with Eric Simpson. Welcome to our third episode of Grief Heals, where we're really talking about how grief does heal. And you can hear that both ways, right? Like that our grief heals, and also that grief itself is a healing agent healing us. And so we're just exploring this. And one of the ways that we are doing that is discussing Francis Weller's The Five Gates of Grief. But before we get into that, we are hosting, myself and three other coaches, trainers, facilitators, a live in-person workshop that runs for 3 days in Santa Ana. It is called Restoried, where we explore the foundations of transformation, of wholeness, of integration, of metabolizing our grief and our life, so that we can create a new story on purpose for healing ourselves, each other, and our world. And what I'm most excited about is being with people that I've only ever met virtually in this shared space. But if you're interested, you can go to my website, legitu.com, which is in the show notes. And there is a button you can click and learn more about the Restoried training that was written by Brandon Cook of Naming the Real. So
when was that again?
December 8th, 9th, and 10th in Santa Ana, which is in Southern California.
Take it away.
Well, let me ask you, Eric, what comes to mind if I say that one gate of grief is the places that needed and did not receive love? Like just hearing that, what comes to mind?
I think mostly of children who are neglected by their parents. That's the first thing I think of, because it's very important for children to have that kind of attention. To me, the very first foundation of what love is attention.
I agree. This is why, okay, so one of the things that you'll hear me say is that grief is love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's loving to give attention to the places of our own loss. And it's unloving to ignore or move on from. And when you said that, I was like, yes, we all need love. And the places that get ignored, and in our culture, that happens often. We just move on from loss and we're like conditioned, just go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are losses of people, of places, of things that have, so that's the first gate of grief we talked about last week, that have been ignored,
right,
that do not receive love. And then that actually ends up becoming the second gate. Like those losses needed love and didn't receive love. And then like you said, it's more than that. It's also where I have been neglected. And it's also, I just want to make really clear, this is not about blame. This is not about wrongdoing. It's not about pointing a finger at a parent saying, you didn't love me. Because if we do that, how far back does it go? If a parent's not giving a child what the child needs, it is more than likely that the parent did not receive the resource that he or she needed as a child. And then you trace it back and it's like, oh my gosh.
I don't know. I just thought of how interesting it is because, I mean, in attempting to define the places that need love and what love is, and, I brought up children being neglected. And then I thought of, some of the parenting styles that are maybe authoritarian, or where they want to be toughen up their kids. I know several people who want their kids to be tough. They even talk about tough love, which always struck me as being a little strange. That's probably a diversion, but I just thought I'd
I
mention
don't
it.
think so. And in fact, I'm on the verge of tears. So I'm expecting my first grandbaby any day.
Hmm.
And you said parenting styles, right? And so we can think of authoritative and oh my gosh, all of it, the three predominant ones, and they're escaping me.
Authoritarian and permissive, and
And then one that sounds like authoritarian, but
yeah,
is
authoritative. Yeah, that's right.
authoritative,
Yeah.
authoritarian, and permissive. That is not where my brain went though, because I'm thinking of parenting trends.
Mhm.
So when I was a young expecting mother, there was a trend around baby wise and the EZOs, and I went to conferences and whatever, but we were taught, and this was in Christian circles. They were very, very popular in the church, but we were taught that you needed to let a baby self soothe so that they could sleep through the night. So you put your child on a feeding schedule and then you ignore their cries.
Mhm.
It's so tender because literally my grandbaby's due any day and I feel so connected and thinking about ignoring my children, my children's cries
Mhm.
under the influence of, like, I was really genuinely trying to do what was best for my children. And now understanding more about the nervous system and that my infant did not have the resource to self soothe. And that was a place in them, in my babies, that needed love, that needed, how did you define love? Attention.
Right. And it's interesting too, is I mean, that might be sort of a parallel to what we do when we experience pain and loss, is think that we can not self, well, we could self-soothe through distractions, but we ignore the pain to be tough or to move on. I mean, I'm not the grief expert, but I'll ask you if that's the case.
Well, I think it's a perfect parallel. I used to call myself a grief expert on purpose, and now I call myself more a grief apprentice,
Mhm.
just getting some humility around this mystery. But what I do know is that grief is always inviting love. It's
Mhm.
always inviting love to the places that need love. And yes, we do learn as a society, as a culture, and then our own family culture, right? However, we're raised to move on from losses, potentially to be tough. We want to fit in. That, right? All of us want to fit in, even those that are the nomads and the rebels, but there's a sense of belonging. We're made for community. So anyway, I'm listening to a book I highly recommend. It's called Nurturing Resilience. But one of the things that is so interesting is they're talking about epigenetics, and this book
Mhm.
has some focus on trauma and the nervous system. But Eric, talking about how one of the things that has confused clinicians is someone without lived experience presenting with complex trauma symptoms. I don't feel like an expert to define it, but epigenetics is like something sitting on top of the gene and directing the way that a person is experiencing their own life, and that this can be passed down generation to generation.
Right. So
And
epigenetics basically is when an environmental factor impacts a person so that they have a genetic change. Is that correct? And
well,
then
it's not, it does, so that's the thing. It doesn't change the gene, but it's almost like a power switch directing
okay.
the presentation of the
Mhm.
gene.
All right.
And But
But
here's what,
it's this interplay of genetics and environment, though, just in case
yeah,
people didn't know.
and what has not been processed. So here was something that fascinated me is where the impact seems to be the greatest for ancestors, right? Is where someone has like experienced something like the Holocaust or been through a war-torn area or sexual violence, and that individual has simply moved on from that, tried to just live life apart from, and
Hmm.
then their posterity is can experience
Some of the impact and effects of that.
and profoundly so.
Mhm.
Like when we say some, my brain went to like a little bit, and I'm saying no, 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 it can actually have a profound impact in such a way that what I'm saying is people have been like clinicians, doctors, the therapists have been very confused because a person's own individual history might not match the severity of what they're experiencing. And so then you talked about in one of our episodes that the victim ends up feeling blamed, judged, oppressed, like persecuted for being wounded.
Mhm.
and and that's actually happened with whether it's things that we might classify as mental illness. I don't know why. I just don't like that phrase, but and maybe because it's lost the impact of empathy, right? Like it's like those people, and we are all wounded humans and we all have presentation of our woundedness. I believe that grief is always taking us by the hand to bring love to the places that need love. And so it goes unrecognized, unwitnessed. It goes without attention, so it goes without love. So our losses are continually beckoning us. Like it's not the loss, it's the grief that we feel over the loss that draws us in. And that's why when someone is grieving, often it feels like so much comes rushing in, so much loss comes to the forefront. One visual picture of that, it's like if we're a train and we're up front and we're driving the train of our life, and you've got all the cars of what we've experienced, behind us, and then loss feels like like an immediate stopping, and the train is maybe like it feels like a wreck. It's very abrupt. The losses that the train are carrying come all to the front.
Mhm.
And so a person might feel like I am being crushed. I will never live again. We talked about, someone saying, I don't even think I can experience beauty. That, the smell of fresh air, the birds singing, the sun rising, like beauty feels harsh. We collect losses and they all need love.
It's also interesting in that many of the people who have severe disorders that are social disorders, it's because of abandonment issues when they were children, of not receiving the love that they needed or attention that they needed.
So the book that I recommended, Nurturing Resilience, and forgive me, I can't remember that. I think one author might be Kathy Kane. I read so many books at one time, I just kind of blend authorship, but that book really talks about some of what you just shared. And this is the point. Like I personally have mixed views about the DSM, because the minute we classify someone with a disorder, we often treat them like machinery that needs to be fixed. And what I believe at the core of my being is that we are human and we need to be loved. And now, understanding more about our brain, about our biology, about our nervous system, about co regulation, this idea that we need to be attuned to in order to develop optimally. And then also, what's so beautiful is understanding that there, with love, with somebody attuning to us in our adult years, our body, our brain, our everything in us is made to heal, and we can come back together in wholeness. But a lot of these disorders, you can listen and hear some form of disintegration, some form of fragmenting, something that is separate. If you think of love like an adhesive that moves through and gets in all the crevices, it's simply bringing us back together. It's not creating something brand new. It's like giving us an experience of the wholeness that we are in our essence, the wholeness that we are in our communities, the wholeness that we are in our world. Like, we are all utterly connected. Connection is the key to healing. And love binds, love connects, love heals. And grief is always an invitation of love getting in. Okay, and for those of us who have not known love, that is a longer process, because it is like the body literally is on high alert, where even love feels dangerous. Everything feels dangerous. And when everything feels dangerous, we act like things are dangerous, which is often reciprocated in a defensive posture, which then affirms, oh, see, I am in danger. This may sound like it's off topic. My point is, okay, if I'm thinking of First Corinthians, and I think the very first thing is love is patient.
Mhm.
And this idea of moving in with a patience, a slowness, an attuneness, an understanding that, look, I have a neighbor who randomly starts screaming at the top of his lungs. He has waved a hatchet. He has made threats. And what do people say? That he is crazy. He is, and then he's vilified, right? And talked about. But people don't just all of a sudden act like that.
Mhm.
These are wounded humans, and wounds that are often passed down generationally. And so, okay, now the fourth generation is acting in such a way, and guess what? The people that have gone behind them are like, you have no idea what suffering is. You have no idea what suffering is. I suffered.
Mhm.
But it's like, yes, 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 you did. And your suffering that did not receive love and attention, I am carrying, even in my physical being, even though I didn't experience what you experienced. It is complex. Like the solution is complex and simple, I think. But the further away we've gotten from our own natural way of being, the more industrialized society has become, the more separate. Like, I was watching an episode of Call the Midwife. If you don't know what that is, it's a show where midwifery was the norm, and people went at all out midwives went at all hours of the night, called upon whenever a woman was in labor, went to their home, stayed as long as was needed. And then there's an episode where one of the midwives goes to it's a hospital. People can be treated for free, and the nurses function in shifts. And there's all these benefits, right? But then there's also losses, because everything is split into segments. So you no longer get to stay with the patient throughout the whole process. The woman having the baby, the person she bonds with doesn't get to stay with her, and you see the loss of even some of what progress has brought us, some of the ways that it has disintegrated the whole, right? Some of the ways that we are fractured. And it just made me think of, like, the more that happens, our solutions are also industrialized. And we need community, and we need nature, and we need love, and we need, like, the things that heal. The more a person is taken away from society, away from community, away from nature, like, it makes everything more complex. I think I've taken us on a trail, and you can see where my brain and mind and thoughts and wrestlings are. And I'd like to bring us back for some hope in the current world in which we live,
Mhm.
right? And bringing love to the places that have not received love.
This may sound simplistic, but it was a revelation to me that we don't have to do grand things to love others or to ourselves, that it's as simple as attention. And when you realize that what you give your attention to, I mean, it can start to have really profound implications. You can choose to give your attention to your neighbor or to yourself, or you can give your attention to entertainment, to a television show or to radio or pornography or all sorts of other things in our society. And so we all have this amazing power of attention.
And what we give our attention to grows.
Mhm.
It's like feeding the energy. Even on just nervous system health. So I was talking about there's a defensive orientation where everything can feel dangerous. And what you're reminding me is by giving attention in exploration, oh, this cup has, if I feel it, there's ridges.
Mhm.
Oh, that's fascinating, right? Giving my attention there, that and giving my attention to how, like before you and I came on, we gave attention to where our feet were and how things felt in our body, and what we could hear in the room with us or further away. Giving attention without evaluation, with curiosity, naturally balances out and helps to bring down the defensive orientation, which also makes space to receive love, compassion. But I just love that attention is so simple and yet so profound and has so much healing opportunity, possibility.
When we're talking about the places that did not receive love, if that is an overwhelming factor in a person's life, and I think my understanding is that this desire to be loved and maybe a distorted way of seeking to soothe oneself winds up being expressed through sort of narcissistic tendencies. You know,
Yeah.
actually, the actual narcissists, clinical narcissists, is very small percentage in our
Yeah.
culture. But
You wouldn't know that with how popularized it is.
right,
Everyone's a narcissist, it
right,
appears.
right. I mean, some people are just jerks, but we all have narcissistic tendencies,
Absolutely.
and part of that comes out of the desire to be loved.
Yes. I genuinely I can look back at my young mothering, my parenting style, all these things, myself as a wife, things that I have really wanted to criticize. And yet, when I look through that lens of this is a woman who just wanted to be loved and was trying to figure life out and made lots of mistakes, as we all do, that woman, that younger version of me, needs so much love. And also to recognize that the even younger version of me, right, that helped her to become the mom she was, also needs so much. Like we all need, require, deserve, are made for love. That is literally why I would say emphatically, conclusively, that grief heals, because grief is like a roadmap to bring love, not just to the places that didn't receive love, also to the places that have experienced loss, the first gate of grief, right? Also bringing love to the sorrows of our world, also bringing love to what we needed but didn't receive, right? Also bringing love to our ancestors, also bringing love to trauma.
So when somebody realizes that there are places that did not receive love in their lives, how do they grieve that, or what does that grief look like? And how does it have its healing effect?
Let's just start with where you brought us, and that is just give attention.
Mm-hmm.
This is a loss. This is a wound. This is a place that needs nurturing. We don't even have to know how to nurture, right? The first thing is to recognize this is a place of wounding. This is not a place for judgment. This is not a place for criticism, evaluation, shame, right? Kicking to the curb. It's simply, I'm giving my attention to this is a part that needs love. We could just start there. Because like everything else, there's a process of anything and all things living. So let's start with allowing attention.
You've been listening to Grief Heals with Lisa Michelle Zega. The podcast is produced by me, Eric Simpson, in association with Jump Up and Down Productions. Music by Ken Delian, Drunken Nights to Sunday Mornings, and Stefan Carlin, A Calming Ocean, A Common Notion. If you would like more information about the work Lisa does, point your browsers to legityou.com. That's LEGITYOU. Lisa can also be reached at lisamichelle@legityou.com. This has been a Jump Up and Down production.